Do you know those days when everything seems out of place? When the heart squeezes, anxiety dominates, and the mind gets stuck in a maze of doubts and concerns. If you are living this now, stop, breathe, because this message did not appear by chance, but by purpose. There is a larger plan in action, even when everything seems confusing. Perhaps you are expecting answers, trying to understand why certain doors have closed or why God's silence seems so deafening. But what if I told you that even in this silence, the sky is moving to your advantage, that God's time never fails, and that there is miracles preparing exactly where you only see chaos? You do not need magic formulas or an unshakable faith 24 hours a day. You just need to take a step today, one step towards trust, to hope, to the relationship with God. Here, we'll talk about it with an open heart and firm feet in the truth you release. Your story is still being written, and it can be more amazing than you think. This message will show you that there is purpose in pain, peace in the middle of the storm, and an invitation to the transformation that starts from the inside out. It's not just another video, it's a reunion with what really matters. If you feel that word is for you, then it is, because she is. Even when everything seems to be out of the axis, God's plan remains in motion. Sometimes we feel we are just changing the tires with the car walking, trying to survive another day. Health problems that seem to have no end, delays in dreams that burn in their hearts, relationships that hurt us. And then that question hits, where's God all this? The truth? He never got out of control. Even in chaos, His plan is unfolding even if you still can't see it. God never promised a life without difficulty, but He guaranteed presence, direction, and purpose in every detail. If you are facing uncertainties now, this is not a sign of abandonment, but part of a larger process. Look at Joseph's life in Egypt: sold, forgotten, wronged, but in the end, exalted. This is God's plan in action. It may seem messy now, but that's exactly where redemption begins. Your story has not yet reached the climax. God is still writing. It is normal to be afraid when the floor seems to disappear, but that is precisely where we are invited to trust not what we see, but in whom God is. Spiritual strengthening is not born in comfort, but in the struggle. Instead of trying to control everything, how about starting with a diary with God? Write what you feel, what you expect, and what you need to deliver. This helps to organize the heart and recognize the little miracles that are already happening. God sees what you don't see. He sees beyond the now. Sometimes it allows the delay of a blessing to prepare your heart to her. He is more interested in His growth than in His comfort. This is not punishment, it's careful. And it is in this care that inner peace is born, one that does not depend on circumstances. Understanding this, you start living with less anxiety and more hope. The Word is full of people who lived uncertainties, but has not been stopped. Moses had to trust God's plan even with the sea closed in front. Abraham left without knowing where he was going. David was anointed king and had to wait for years fleeing. This is no coincidence, it is divine time. And if God acted with them, why wouldn't you act with you? The same God continues in charge, and He does not change. So instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Try asking, God, what do you want to show me here? This change of perspective transforms pain toward. Of course, it's not always easy, but that's where faith comes in trust, even without understanding. And look, this delivery will take you to places you can't even imagine. And speaking of trusting even without understanding, anxiety is not freshness. It's real, it's heavy, and sometimes it gives the throat just thinking about what ahead. It can appear in the middle of the dawn, in the silence of the car, or even during a service. But do you know what liberating is? Knowing that God is not scared of His anxiety, He welcomes. In 1 Peter 5:7 it is written, "Launch all His anxiety about Him, because He is careful from you." All, not only a little bit. Launch is a strong word. It is playing hard with decision. It is not putting slowly and pulling back when it beats the fear. It is to trust that, when launching, God will hold on. This requires practice, requires delivery. It's not automatic, but it's transformative. Start the day praying with sincerity, Lord, I don't know how to deal with it, but I know you know. Prayer need not be beautiful. It needs to be true. Anxiety is rooted in trying to control what escapes our hands. And let's be honest, most things run away. We were out trying to predict the future, avoid problems, and please everyone. But God didn't call us to be exhausted, He called us to rest in Him. This is not passivity, it is active faith. Delivering control to God is an act of courage, not of weakness. Sometimes what most feeds anxiety is isolation. So look for healthy connections. A small group of the church, a spiritual mentor, a friendship that reminds you of grace. And if the hole seems too deep, don't be afraid to seek professional help too. Faith and therapy walk together. Yes, God uses many means to heal us. He is the God of miracles, but it is also the God of the process. Cultivating a relationship with God is the most effective antidote against the chronic anxiety of the soul. When you pray, read the Word, write in your diary with God, something inside begins to change. It is as if the soul returned to the axis. Gradually, you realize that you are not alone on the boat. Jesus is with you in the storm. He won't let this wind sink you. Inner peace begins to sprout. Anxiety can scream loudly, but God speaks louder. But to listen, sometimes you need to silence the noise around. This may mean turning off the phone for a while, changing the playlist, or just being silent for a few minutes, taking a deep breath and saying, God, I trust you. It is in this space of surrender that faith begins to flourish. And when faith grows, trusting someone we barely know is practically impossible, right? And with God is no different. Faith is not born out of nowhere, it grows when we know who God really is. Jeremiah 29:11 reveals a little bit of his heart. I know the plans I have for you. Plans to make them prosper, not to cause harm. Plans to give hope and a future. This is not beautiful speech, it's firm promise. And his promises do not fail. The problem is that often our image of God has been distorted by human experiences. Absent parents, toxic religious leaders, frustrations. All this can affect as we see God. But the truth is in the Bible. And the more we plunged into it, the more we discover a patient, just, loving, and compassionate God. A Father who corrects with love, but also comforts with tenderness. Want to strengthen your trust in God? Start with the Gospels. Read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as if it were the first time. Observe Jesus. See how he treated the afflicted, how he loved the forgotten, as he forgiven those that no one forgiven. He is the exact image of God. Every gesture of him is a reflection of the Father. And the more you know Jesus Christ, the more you trust your plan, even when it seems strange. Trust also grows with personal experiences. Remember a moment when everything seemed lost, and suddenly something happened that could only be God? Write this, guard, share. This becomes a memorial of divine fidelity, a reminder that he has acted before and can act again. And even if the scenario now seems challenging, his character remains the same. God is good, always. It is common to seek understanding before trusting, but with God, order is reversed. We trust before understanding. It's like walking in the dark, holding the hand of those who already know the way. You may not see, but he knows exactly where he is taking you. Confidence is not based on logical certainties, but on the certainty of the heart that he is faithful. And this is learned in the constant relationship with him. The confidence that springs from God's knowledge brings a different peace. It is not the absence of problems, but his presence among them. It is knowing that even if the winds change, the plan continues. That even if the answers take time, care never fails. And it is this certainty that prepares the heart for something greater. Because when you start trusting even without understanding, obeying God will not always make sense. In fact, most of the time, it seems crazy. Imagine being in front of a fortified city as Jericho, and the order is go back in silence for 7 days, then scream. Serious? This has no human logic. But it was exactly this obedience, simple, persistent, and full of faith that knocked down the walls. The miracle did not come from the scream, it came from faith in the direction of God. A lot of people want to see miracles, but without moving in obedience. But God's moving is released when we trust to the point of acting. And sometimes, what he asks is contraindicative. Forgive those who hurt. offer when missing, wait when everything in us wants to run. Obeying is like planting an invisible seed. You still don't see the fruit, but you already trust that it will be born. And this active delivery, the impossible. Obedience is what separates the listener from the practitioner. And the Bible is clear: who listens and does not practice is like who builds house in the sand. Come the storm, and everything collapses. But who obeys builds on the rock. This is where spiritual strengthening is born, not what we understand, but what we choose to trust and live. Faith without works is killed, and obedience is the bridge between the promise and the miracle. Want to learn to obey even when it makes no sense? Start with small steps. If God is calling you to forgive someone, write a letter even if it never delivered. If He asks you to take a step in ministry, talk to your spiritual leader. The action releases clarity. And even if the fear comes, goes with fear, but goes with God. Obedience does not require absence of fear. It requires the presence of faith. Jericho did not fall on the first day. It was 7, in silence. What does this teach us? That not all obedience brings immediate result. Sometimes it is necessary to persist, walk in circles, but with purpose, trusting that each return is weakening a wall, even if it still seems intact. And that goes for your life too. With each prayer, with every step of faith, something is changing even if your eyes don't see yet. And when the wall falls, we understand it was not just about Victoria, it was about process. God wanted to form something to you before giving you something. Because the miracle is not only the end of the fight, it is also the growth in its midst. And when we understand this, we are ready to really trust God's time. Even when He seems late, we live running against time, right? Everything is urgent. It has to work until the end of the month. I need to solve this still today. I was supposed to have married, passed in the contest, began that project. But God's time does not fit our timer. In 2 Peter 3:8, it is written that for God, one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. That is, He is not delayed. He acts at the right time in His time. The truth is that human time screams, but divine time teaches. And one of the greatest lessons is learning to trust the process. Sometimes the backwardness is protection. Other times, it is preparation. Remember Habakkuk 2:3? If you last, wait, because it will surely come, it won't be long. It seems like a word game, but it is the essence of faith to wait, for trusting that it is not in vain. The wait is part of the plan. While we wait, God works. He is not stopped. It is organizing scenarios, shaping hearts, connecting purposes. What looks like silence is often backstage. And whoever lives by faith learns to rest even when nothing happens. This is not comfort, it is confidence. Inner peace blooms when we understand that God's time is part of the miracle, not an obstacle to Him. But how to live this truth in everyday life? A practical tip: instead of complaining about time, pray on it. Say, Lord, help me trust your pace. Write in your diary with God how you feel, what you expect, and what you have learned while waiting. This aligns your heart with heaven. And when your soul aligns with divine time, despair gives way to hope. Look at biblical examples. Sarah laughed when she heard she would have a son in old age, but laughed with joy when Isaac was born. David was anointed king as a teenager, but waited for years until he climbed the throne. Jesus only began as prosecutor at 30, after 3 decades of preparation. God is in no hurry. He has purpose. And when the purpose is greater, the preparation needs to be deep. So if it seems that God is taking too long, perhaps He is preparing you. Maybe He's saving you from something you can't even imagine, or simply strengthening you for what is to come. Because when you understand that His time is perfect, you stop running and start walking firm, with faith, and with your eyes fixed in Christ. And on this walk, prayer becomes your resting place. Prayer is not just a religious ritual, it is a dialogue of soul with God. It is there, in the secret, that anxiety finds shelter, that the tired mind finds rest, and the bustling heart begins to slow down. Philippians 4 verses 6 and 7 says, "Do not look anxious for anything, but in everything, for prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God." And the result? The peace of God that exceeds all understanding will keep your heart and mind. This peace is not the one that comes when everything is calm. It is a peace that visits you in the middle of the storm, which involves you even when the problems have not yet been solved. It does not depend on circumstances, it depends on presence. And the presence of God is accessed by prayer. It's like entering a silent room in the chaos of life. A safe place where you can be real, fragile, sincere, and yet be welcomed. A lot of people complicate the prayer, thinking they need to use right words or the right formulas. But God is not seeking performance, He wants proximity. You can talk to Him as who speaks to a father, an intimate friend, a counselor. Complain, cry, thank you, be silent. All this is prayer. And the more you pray, the more you realize that you are being shaped inside. It is like going to tuning the heart to the tone of heaven. A practical tip: create a fixed time to pray, even if it's 5 minutes a day. It may be upon waking, before bed, or at the time of lunch. Separate this moment as those who separate time for someone important, because it is. Another idea is to use a prayer notebook, noting requests, thanks, and even answers received. This strengthens faith and helps you remember that God is listening. Yes. Prayer is also a listening space. God does not always respond with words, but He speaks through the Word, the peace that floods, a verse that jumps into the eyes, or an unexpected answer in everyday life. When we pray, our spiritual sensitivity increases. We begin to notice signs where we once saw only silence. And this completely transforms the way we face the battles. So if you are tired, distressed, lost, pray, even without strength, even without words. Because sometimes the simple act of saying, "Father, I need you," is enough to open the heavens. And when prayer becomes habit, inner peace becomes constant. And it is with this peace that we learn to live one day at a time with renewed grace. Because the grace of God comes daily, and that's what we will talk about. We live wanting to stock strength, as if it were possible to keep courage for tomorrow. But God works differently. It gives us enough for today. No more, no less. In Lamentations 3 verses 22 and 23, it is written that the Lord's mercies renew each morning. That is, what you need to face this day has already been provided. It is daily. There is no way to accumulate. You have to look again tomorrow. Jesus reinforces this in Matthew 6 and 34. Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring your own concerns. Your own evil is enough every day. It is not about ignoring the future, but about trusting that today's God will also be there tomorrow. When we try to live tomorrow with today's strength, anxiety grows and peace disappears. But when we live one day at a time with God, the journey gets lighter. This is a powerful truth for those who live overwhelmed. You don't have to solve everything now, nor have all the answers. God does not ask you for a 5-year plan. He wants His faithfulness today. It changes everything. Life becomes less about control and more about confidence. And then, the morning prayer gains another meaning. Lord, just for today, teaches me to trust. It sustains me, guides me, gives me peace. A powerful habit is to start the day with a verse, a small prayer, and a moment of silence. It doesn't have to be time-consuming, but it needs to be intentional. This aligns your soul with heaven. And over time, you will realize that that moment with God is more essential than coffee. Serious. Because this is where you supply the grace that will support your decisions, your reactions, and even your mood. God is a Father who knows our limit. He does not demand from you what is not yet given you, but it is your responsibility to seek today's portion. This involves biblical reading, prayer, as well as practical attitudes. Sleep better, feed right, take care of mental health. All of this is part of your daily delivery. God wants to take care of you completely, spirit, soul, and body. So if your heart is restless with what hasn't happened yet, breathe. Calm the mind. And remember, tomorrow is in His hands. Its part is to live today with faith, hope, and spiritual sensitivity. Because it is in this gift lived with purpose that the strength is born to continue. And when you live like this, you realize that true delivery begins with trust and is complete in reconciliation. Giving God is not a sign of weakness. It is the greatest act of courage that one can have. It is to say, I don't realize it alone, but I trust who can do everything. True delivery begins when we stop fighting God and starts walking with Him. It does not mean immediate perfection, but daily disposition. And do you know what is most beautiful? God never rejects those who come back with sincerity. Never. You may have been away for years. Or maybe you have never really approached. It doesn't matter. Jesus is with open arms. The cross is proof that there is no error that He cannot forgive, nor that He cannot redeem. Romans 5:8 says that God proves His love for us. Christ died in our favor when we were still sinners. That is, He loved you at His worst moment. And love now. Reconciliation with God brings inner peace like nothing else in this world. It's like coming home after years lost. It is resting in a love that does not need to be conquered, only accepted. And from this reconnection, it all starts to gain new meaning: the pain, the delays, the restarts. Everything becomes part of a larger plan, full of redemption and purpose. If you feel it is far away, you can go back right now. No need to expect a service, a ceremony, or a perfect moment. Just a sincere prayer. Say, Lord, I surrender. I reconcile with you. Forgive me, renew me, transform me. This simple attitude changes everything. Because when the heart surrenders, heaven moves. And a new journey begins with Jesus in the center. Living with Christ is not about having a life without problems, but it is having a life with direction. He guides you when you don't know where to go, supports you when everything seems to crumble, and loves you. Always. So don't be afraid to start over. Even if you have tried before and failed, God's grace has no expiration date. Every day is a new invitation. Every morning, a chance to start over. And it is in this delivery that a greater purpose is born. When you reconcile with God, life is no longer only survival and becomes mission. You find out that you have been called, that you are loved, that it has a role in the kingdom. And Christian motivation no longer comes from achievements, but of communion. And the closer you approach Him, the more you understand that this journey with Jesus is just the beginning. So, what are you going to do with all that you heard today? Will you let you pass as another beautiful message, or will you allow God to use that word to transform your walk? The invitation is made: deliver, trust, obey, wait. Live with Jesus, not in a theoretical, but real, intimate, daily way. Have you been with anxiety or hope? Have you sought control or chosen rest? Have you trusted your plan or God's plan? Maybe it's time to stop running and start walking with purpose. Perhaps what you needed most today was this reminder: God did not forget you. So if this message said to you, you do one thing, share with someone you also need to hear. Multiplies this seed. And most importantly, reconcile with the sky. Pray again. Go back to the Word. Go back to presence. Start, even if gradually, to build this relationship with God. You are not alone. Never been. And now that you know that, live with intentionality. Live with faith. Live with Christ. Oh, and if you want to continue receiving content like this, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and stay with us on this journey of spiritual growth. Here is a place of strengthening, encouraging, and reunion with the purpose. Let's live everything God has for you.